Afrik Best Radio is online radio is either pre-recorded MP3 files or live via a microphone broadcast that are streamed over the internet. With Afrik Best Radio, we are not limited to one geographic area or dependent upon syndication partners picking up your show in order for it to be heard. It can be heard all over the world, global. The best and easiest way to listen to Afrik Best Radio on your phone in your car is via the appropriate...
Hello and welcome to Storytelling. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Richard and I'll be your host today. And we're sponsored by Afrik Best Radio. And today, let's look at a different form of media. We've, in the past, looked at a book and a video game in terms of review and analyzing what makes them tick. But now let's jump ship to a different medium, in this case, into film. And today, the film that we're going to be looking at is a film by a bunch of European studios as well as one Japanese studio called The Red Turtle. And don't go anywhere because we will be getting right into the film after this break.
App, Afrik Best Radio, official apps. Our website at www.afrikbestradio.online. Our partners that offer apps include Afrik Best Radio on Pandora, Afrik Best Radio on Last.fm, Afrik Best Radio on iHeartRadio, Afrik Best Radio on LiveX Live, Afrik Best Radio on TuneIn Radio, and many more. Just type Afrik Best Radio on any browser or search engine online. How do we promote your business? Afrik Best Radio advertising can help you to get so many listeners while they are busy in their daily work on can easily promote business or brand. They gives you voice to your brand. Others provide readers.
Hello and welcome. And let's jump right into The Red Turtle, the film that we're looking at today. So, The Red Turtle is a collaboration film between Japan's Studio Ghibli as well as the director Dudon DeWitt, as well as a bunch of film studios and animation studios all around Europe that came together to make this film. The director of this film isn't a typical director that makes feature-length films. Instead, he's known more for his short films and minimalism kind of style. So when he was tasked to make this large feature-length film with a bunch of high-class studios, with a bunch of these elite studios, he had a few problems in mind. And looking at the production of The Red Turtle, you'll see that the initial idea for the film is for the animation studios to draw this whole film on paper and have that transferred digitally and animated. However, throughout the production, they changed that technique into more of a 2D digitally animated kind of animation style. And the reason for this was to try and keep the minimalism kind of vibe that he's known for in his short films and his other things, but at the same time keeping to the studio production values as well as keeping to the budget, because in this kind of production it was a little bit different due to the fact that they had kind of a smaller animation studios than kind of other places. And originally this whole thing was planned to be drawn on paper, but then, as I've said, they switched to digitally animated 2D film. However, not everything was animated in 2D or animated on the computer, because the backgrounds for this film, as if you watch the film you'll see, the backgrounds of these films are actually drawn with charcoal onto paper. And the reason they did this was to allow for a specific type of feel and a specific type of look to the film, at least the backgrounds, because as you know, if you watch films, or at least animated films, the backgrounds give a lot to the feeling of the film. And the reason they did this is so that they can control the background of the film into this kind of feeling which seems a little bit organic as well as a little bit abstract, but still keeping the minimalist vibe that the director is, again, known for. And so this kind of background drawing made into the film. And if you take a look at the film, if you take a look at just the film's poster, or if you actually take a look at the film itself, you'll see that this is kind of the case. That being said, the production was not as big as other productions, especially European productions for these films, because, again, the budget was lower. And because of this, they had some constraints, which actually didn't seem to affect the movie that much in the end, because in the end, they went for a minimalist kind of vibe, which allowed them to have less on the screen while showing more. But all this stuff, all this kind of like different things that go into the production of the film, in the end just gives the film this kind of different feeling. And now let's get into a little bit of what the film's about. As the name suggested, one of the things that shows up throughout this film is a red turtle, a red sea turtle to be exact. And basically this movie, or this film, when you're watching it, is about a man who gets stranded on an island and tries to escape. Now, I won't give you too much details about the plot of the movie or little things that happen, because in the end I do think that you should go and give this movie a watch by yourself, allowing it to just actually allowing it to feel the actual feel of the movie and to see these things happen without getting spoiled about the little kind of story beats. But the main plot is a guy who lands on an island through a storm. Again, this happens right away in the movie. A guy lands on an island in a storm and he tries to escape it. At least that's the setup to the movie. And that's kind of the setting of this whole movie, where we have this deserted island with no other people on, a guy who's trying to get out of the island, and his attempts, at least for the first little part of the movie. And with this kind of setup, you have kind of like a lot of things that you can do with it. However, the way the movie's vibe works is in the way that they express this character's characteristics. And here is where the interesting part of the movie comes in. Because unlike normal movies, this movie is almost devoid of all dialogue. If you watch through the whole movie, there's only a few instances where any characters say any words at all. Actually, there might only be around 11, 10, or even less instances where they say words, and these type of words that are said usually are just shouts. Hey, hello, woo, all these kind of things that are just being said. And the reason, at least the reason I think this is happening, is because, one, to keep in line with the minimalist vibe and keeping with the theme of the movie, and another, to allow a look at these characters and to allow us to fill in the blanks and kind of build these characters up as we see fit. And the different techniques and the different things that they use in order to allow this movie to not have any speaking in it, or not have any conversation in it, and yet still get the main idea, or get the ideas and the plots and all these different things from the movie to the viewer, is absolutely amazing. And we'll be talking about that in the next section, but for now, let's take a look at a few more things about the movie. Mainly in the second section, we'll mainly be looking at the different ways that they told the story without voice, but that's not the only kind of feature of the story. The Red Turtle as a film has a feel more in line with indie films or short films rather than long feature-length movies. And basically what this means is that they pack it with a lot of symbolisms and metaphors and a lot of things that are basically under the surface for the viewer to experience. And this medium, where the movie or the film doesn't say anything and doesn't have conversation, really plays towards this kind of feel, because it allows the reader, or it allows the viewer, to infer everything. Everything we see happens, but we don't know what any of the characters think. We don't know what's going on in the minds of any characters. We don't know what's going on in their thought process, why they do the things they do. And while it can be inferred pretty easily from some of the actions that's being done by these characters and the way that they do these actions, and a lot of different ways to kind of think about what's happening, it's never given to you in concrete and absolutes. Basically, the whole movie, you have to infer what happens, and you have to keep guessing. And this vibe really works well with the kind of themes of this story, and kind of like this underlying, or at least the fact that the story has an underlying story of metaphors and of symbolism and all these stuffs that you can explore. The general way that they don't talk allows you to begin exploring these things, as you're not distracted by conversation, or you're not distracted by all these different words or anything. So in the end, the movie works well because it allows the viewer to interpret the story how they want. And this can lead to many different interpretations of what the story can mean or what the story is about. And if you just take a look online and you just take a scroll through people's different theories and different ideas of what the movie represents or what the movie means, you'll see that there's actually a lot of different things that people say, and a lot of the times they're able to bring up lots of evidence and lots of different things to support these kind of claims and theories, which is interesting because a lot of these theories are completely different from each other. And this is playing to the strengths of the movie as it allows people to have conversations about the movie. What does it do and all these different things. But taking the symbolisms and all these things aside, we can't forget that the movie, the way it's animated, the way it moves and all these things is absolutely gorgeous to watch. The score of the movie, the music, the background music of the movie, as well as the sound design, the little different sounds of the island, the little sounds of animals, of rain, what it sounds like inside the denser parts of the island, what it sounds like on the beach, what the waves sound like, all these things, as well as the movement of the characters, the background designs I've described, the character designs itself, and the water and all these different things put together just makes this kind of really stunning package to look at. And if you give this movie a watch, any scene at all, and you just kind of delve into the feel of the movie, you'll understand the appeal of the movie, basically. It's absolutely gorgeously animated, and it allows you to get lost in the kind of settings and the kind of environment the movie puts out, and allows you to just be completely absorbed into the movie. And this works really well, and this is really important towards this movie because, again, it has no dialogue. It can't catch and keep you with witty wordplay or with any of these kind of things to do with dialogue at all, so it has to find different ways to not only keep your attention, but keep you guessing and keep you thinking and engaged with the movie. And because of the stunning visuals, as well as a lot of other things that we're going to talk about in the second part, the movie is able to do this relatively well. And another thing that the movie does in order to supplement the fact that it doesn't have any dialogue is its rather short runtime. The whole film, the whole movie, feature length as it is only 80 minutes long. That's 1 hour and 20 minutes. And the thing with that is, it's relatively short for a feature-length movie, especially one that came out as recently as 2016. If you look at any other movies from that year or the few years previous and the years after that until now, you'll see that a lot of movies are longer. Maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours, but not 1 hour and 20 minutes. And the reason for this is that, again, it doesn't have dialogue, and no matter how much you put into keeping the reader's attention, you can only hold it for so long if they're used to all this dialogue and all these different type of conversations in these movies. So the choice to make the film shorter and to try to tell a complete story in a shorter time not only gives towards this vibe of minimalism and only showing what's necessary, but also allow it so that the viewer won't get bored and try to click off the movie or anything like that, allowing them to just, or at least the movie stays around just as long as it's welcome and not a second longer. And basically that is a few things about the movie before we get into the main topic that we have today, which is basically taking a look at how the movie is able to tell a complete and rich and really well told story without saying that many words or without having any dialogue between characters. So look forward to that, and we'll be right back with that. So don't go anywhere and stay with us, because we will be right back after the break.
Afrik Best Radio is online radio is either pre-recorded MP3 files or live via a microphone broadcast that are streamed over the internet. With Afrik Best Radio, we are not limited to one geographic area or dependent upon syndication partners picking up your show in order for it to be heard. It can be heard all over the world, global. The best and easiest way to listen to Afrik Best Radio on your phone in your car is via the appropriate app, Afrik Best Radio, official apps. Our website at www.afrikbestradio.online. Our partners that offer apps include Afrik Best Radio on Pandora, Afrik Best Radio on last.fm, Afrik Best Radio on iHeartRadio, Afrik Best Radio on LiveX Live, Afrik Best Radio on TuneIn Radio, and many more. Just type Afrik Best Radio on any browser or search engine online. How do we promote your business? Afrik Best Radio advertising can help you to get so many listeners while they are busy in their daily work on can easily promote business or brand. They gives you voice to your brand. Others provide readers and experience that can truly define your brand and business. Afrik Best Radio advertising is different. It gives your brand a voice and reminds listeners about your product or service. Those who hear your ad can build a mental image of your brand.
Broadcasting worldwide, online 24/7.
Hello and welcome back to Storytelling, to the second part where we're going to get straight into the main topic of today, which is how this movie tells a story without any dialogue. But before that, let's give a few shout outs to the people who are watching, because normally there's not many of those. Shout out to Jeffrey Hassel, who keeps calling me Dr. Megahertz, and I'll consider whether or not if I'll keep that name. Shout out to Babai, who apparently says I have a nice hairstyle, which I'm not sure about, as well as to all the people who are watching, such as Maddie Linskell, who again says I'm not going to mention them and ignore them, so I didn't do that. And now let's get back into the main topic, which is how this story tells a story without using any dialogue. So how do you do it? Last week we talked about a few methods of characterization, and one of the things that came up is how other characters perceive your character, how they talk about your character, and how they talk to your character. That should give you basically an idea of how important it is how important dialogue is to storytelling, how important it is to have people communicate in different ways. But let's take a step back and review that, because I've been misleading you a little bit. The Red Turtle isn't a story without dialogue or conversation, it's a story without spoken dialogue or conversation. Between the characters in the movie, there actually is dialogue, just non-verbal. You don't have the same type of dialogues that you have in other movies where characters would directly speak to each other, would directly say words to each other, or any of that kind of stuff. Instead, you have characters communicating in different ways. They communicate to each other with gestures. They communicate to us with expressions and all these type of things. And let's just run through a few things that they do. One thing that is done really well in this movie, despite the art style, is the expressions or the facial expressions of the different characters. And the reason I'm saying this right now is because this movie has kind of a strange way of basically doing the faces of the character. While most things are fine, and they keep a minimalist kind of feel to the faces and not give it too much details, maybe a beard, maybe a mouth. But one of the details that they omit is the whites in the eyes of the characters. Instead, if you take a look at the movie, most of the characters' eyes is taken by the pupil. And while that might seem like it will lower the expressiveness of the character and make it so that you can't really understand what the character is looking at or what they're thinking, the movie actually mends this by not placing emphasis on the gaze and the eyes, or at least the direct eye of the character, but giving emphasis and emotion to instead the rest of their face. How's their mouth moving? Are they smiling? Is their face just a flat face? Are they frowning? And another thing that the movie puts a lot of detail into is the eyebrows of these different characters. And you'll understand this if you take a look at the movie, if you watch any of the movie where the characters are emoting or expressing their emotions in different ways, how absolutely expressive the eyebrows of each of these characters are. When they're curious, they'll raise an eyebrow. When they're mad, their eyebrows furrow. And when they're happy, they would arrange themselves in a way that allows us to understand exactly how they're feeling. And while you might not get the exact position of their feeling at the moment, how happy they are, you understand at least the basic feel. And in a way, that really works for this movie because, in a sense, in real life at least, you don't exactly know how people feel either. Instead, you're able to just infer how they feel, how strongly they feel, and all these kind of things. So when you take that and you kind of combine it with the eyebrows, at least in this movie, you kind of get that same feel as if you're actually in the same room with someone and trying to figure out how they feel and try to figure out what's going on in their mind without being able to talk to them. But that's not the only way that they tell a story. This is just one of the ways that they do characterization, and they allow us into the mind of the characters. Another way they do that is with the actions and the body language of the characters, which is done, again, really well. In the beginning of the movie, there is a scene where the main character, or at least our character who gets washed up onto the island, finds himself in a bamboo forest as a cloud of rain is approaching him quickly. But he doesn't know what this is, and so he's startled with the sound, and in this one moment, he picks up a piece of bamboo on the ground and enters kind of like a battle stance, holding the bamboo kind of like a spear. What does this tell us about him? First of all, he assumes a really well-balanced stance. He crouches down at least, or bends his knees, and holds his bamboo spear in a way that allows it to have its farthest reach. And basically, you can see that his form is steady, calm, and he's ready for whatever that's going to happen. So not only does this allow us to understand what he's feeling, basically in this case, he's scared, or he's startled by the sound of the rain coming towards him, but you also get this kind of idea that he's competent. He knows what he's doing, at least in some situation. He knows what he's doing in this situation, and he's not going to go down easily. And it's these kind of little details, as well as in another scene a little bit forward into the movie where he falls into this kind of cavern, and he's trying to desperately get out. You don't get a word of dialogue, but you understand his desperations just by how frantically he's looking around, how much energy he's expending trying to get out of this cavern. And this contrasts really well, again, with the earlier scene, because in the earlier scene you see how calm and collected he is, you see how well prepared he is for that situation. And you come to this situation and you see that he's completely out of his element, and he's just panicking. And it's these kind of little body language and movements that the character makes that really allows us to understand what they're thinking, what's going on in their mind. While not completely, it allows us to infer. When they're mad, they'll scream. When they're happy, they'll yell in excitement, and all these different things that allows us to just get into the mind space of these characters. And I think it works really well. But that's not the only way that these stories are being told, because the story itself is not just the stories of how the character is feeling. Instead, it's also a story about the environment they're in. And one really magnificent way that the movie gives us a feel of the environment is by the environmental design. What is this? Okay, first of all, let's take a look at the sounds that accompany this movie. I've mentioned before how well the sound design works, how good the sounds are for the waves as well as for the winds and for the bugs in the trees as well as for the crabs on the sand and all these different things. And these kind of things really add up together if you mix the sound and the score. In this case, the score is the music that's accompanying the background music of the film. If you mix these two in a way that plays off each other well, like this film does, you get this really good kind of feel, or this really good kind of vibe that comes from just listening to the movie. You'll get the sound of waves, and sometimes you'll get the sound of waves and a swelling score that allows you to understand that this is a triumphant moment, this is a happy moment, or you'll get silence, or you'll get a score that kind of keys you in that this is a sad moment, or a different feel for each of the scenes. And the way they do this with just purely, not exactly orchestral music, but purely instrumental music, with pianos and with guitars and strings and all these different types of instruments kind of mixing in and allowing you to just grab and grasp the feel of each scene that it's in. Not all scenes have music, and not all scenes have sound design. Sometimes it's completely silent. But the dichotomy of these different type of scenes and the contrast between scenes that have sounds and scenes that don't have sounds allow you to really put yourself into the environment of the kind of film. But environmental sounds and the sound of the score isn't the only way that they convey different types of feels of different scenes. These by itself is really good and really well done, and it allows you to, even if you watch only half the film, which means watch it for a minute and close your eyes for the next minute and watch it for a minute again, you'll basically still get a lot of understanding of what the film's about, of the feel of the film, and all these different kind of things, which really plays to the strengths of the film and really allows you to understand how good it is, in its sense that it can tell you basically what it's about only by using music and sound design. But it doesn't only use music and sound design. Another thing it uses really well to really good effect is color. And what does this mean? It's not in a sense that they'll pop a red tree somewhere, or the sand is yellow, or just the colors look nice, but the tint of the movie changes from time to time to allow you to understand what's happening. When the main character is mad, you might see that the whole scene, the whole screen kind of changes to this reddish tint, where everything, or the colors of everything, kind of turns a little bit more red. Or when it's a sad scene, or when it's a somber scene at night or something, it might change the whole movie to just black and white, allowing you to just understand, allowing you to just get into this kind of environment where the scene completely changes just from the color and kind of like the color filter they put over it. The scenes itself are still rendered in the same colors. The only difference is they would just shift it a little bit in one direction or towards a single color, which allows you to just get this understanding of the mood of each individual scene. And that works really well with the excellent and absolutely excellent background design that is done within the film. I've mentioned before how the background is drawn with charcoal on paper, and this gives it basically a really nice, natural, minimalist vibe. But not only is it drawn by charcoal, but it is absolutely amazingly drawn by charcoal. And if you take a look at any of the backgrounds in the scene, you'll see how stunning it is. The bamboo forest, the mountain, the island itself, and the water, all these kind of set pieces, all these kind of backgrounds that are being used in this film is really well put together in a way that allows you to just get invested in it. It's not drawn in a way to make it seem one for one in real life. In fact, if you take a look at these backgrounds, it seems more like a painting than it does real life. A painting that's trying to imitate life, sure, but more than just try to look like real life, it tries to capture the essence of real life. And this is kind of the way that the background for this movie works really well with the other elements to allow you to experience fully the kind of things in the movie that allows you to just understand it without the words. And what it means is that because the background basically catches the feeling of each scene instead of just what it looks like, when you add that with the color tint as well as the sound design and the score and all these little different elements that they combine together in different amounts, sometimes they'll go all in with all these type of elements for a scene. Sometimes they make it so, sometimes they use so little of these elements that it's just almost barren in kind of the way that it is. But the combination and the dynamic use of each of these elements in combination, in isolation, and just together, alone, and all these kind of things really, really allow you to understand what the movie is about and each scene of the movie. Give it a watch if you want, and you'll understand just how well they allow you to infer different kind of emotions from different scenes, to a point where if you look at a lot of reviews, a lot of people will describe it as emotional and gripping, even though they have, again, no speaking between the characters. And that aside, let's take a quick look at how the characters communicate. I've mentioned before they communicate through gestures, through facial expressions, and through body language, but it's not just done in a way where it communicates to us what they're feeling and that's it. But the character movements and the way they position themselves have so much thought put into them that there was a common theory when the movie came out that it was rotoscoped, or at least the actions are captured from real life people and popped into the animation. However, this isn't true, and they actually animated each individual frame by themselves without using any real life people, or at least real life models to work with. I mean, they drew the characters after the models, but they didn't use any technology to import these type of movements. But that just shows you the strength of basically the way this movie is animated, because you'll have a scene with one or two characters together, whether it's the main character and a bunch of crabs, or it's the main character and, let's say, a seal or a turtle, or any of these type of interactions, and the communication between these characters, whether it's of the same species or of different species, the way that these kind of movements are being drawn, the way that they're being shown, and the kind of frame that they're being shown in really allows us to understand the emotion. And last thing before we get into the final, or before we take a break for the final section, is that, again, in the end, this is a minimalist movie, or at least that's the type of vibe that they're trying to go for, which means that they don't have to clutter the screen with detail. Instead, they focus on details that matter. If you look at a lot of these scenes, while the backgrounds are stunning and the set pieces are absolutely amazingly drawn in, nothing is over-designed and nothing is messy or it jumps out at the viewer, except for the things that they want to jump out the viewer. The characters would sometimes move in front of a still background. It allows us to basically track the character and allows us to focus on the character. Basically, in a sense, the movie is directing our focus into the most important parts, which would allow us to basically understand the feel of the movie. And these are just a few different ways that this movie allows us to experience it without using spoken dialogue. But that's not the only things in the movie, and that's not the only things to appreciate, even though those are the most important things to today's program. We'll be taking a short break now, and when we come back, we'll be taking a look at a few more things about the movies that make it great, who this movie might be for, and who might enjoy it, as well as taking a look at any questions or any comments that any of the viewers might want to post or might want to interact with the show. Just leave something in the comments and we'll take a look at it when the program is over. So thank you, and stick with us because we won't be going anywhere, and we'll be right back after the break.
Afrik Best Radio is online radio is either pre-recorded MP3 files or live via a microphone broadcast that are streamed over the internet. With Afrik Best Radio, we are not limited to one geographic area or dependent upon syndication partners picking up your show in order for it to be heard. It can be heard all over the world, global. The best and easiest way to listen to Afrik Best Radio on your phone in your car is via the appropriate app, Afrik Best Radio, official apps. Our website at www.africbestradio.online. Our partners that offer apps include Afrik Best Radio on Pandora, Afrik Best Radio on Last.fm, Afrik Best Radio on iHeartRadio, Afrik Best Radio on LiveX Live, Afrik Best Radio on TuneIn Radio, and many more. Just type Afrik Best Radio on any browser or search engine online. How do we promote your business? Afrik Best Radio advertising can help you to get so many listeners while they are busy in their daily work on can easily promote business or brand. They gives you voice to your brand. Others provide readers and experience that can truly define your brand and business. Afrik Best Radio advertising is different. It gives your brand a voice and reminds listeners about your product or service. Those who hear your ad can build a mental image of your brand based on the message you deliver. Contact us today for more information. English 00855 81645 Khmer 00855-12-367-764, or visit our website at www.broadcast
online 24/7.
Welcome back to the final part of storytelling, where we look at The Red Turtle, a film made by a collaboration of one Japanese and a bunch of European studios. It is a type of silent film where instead of the film itself is silent, the characters don't use spoken dialogue to communicate with each other. And it's also a film which is rich in metaphors as well as symbolism and a kind of underlying story. We've looked previously at different things that allow this film to work despite the fact that it doesn't use any dialogue, or any spoken dialogue at least. But that's not the only things to appreciate about the movie. Apart from the fact that it's absolutely gorgeous, and apart from the fact that it somehow works without using any spoken words between the characters. There are honestly a lot of more things that make this movie kind of special in the way it is. And the first of which is basically the kind of way that it tells its story. Of course, we mentioned one of the ways it tells a story that is unique, which is basically the fact that it doesn't use any spoken dialogue. But that's not the only way that the storytelling in this movie is unique, and we'll briefly touch on this because we won't have enough time to go in depth into it. But we'll briefly touch on a few other ways that the storytelling in this film is uniquely done. First of all, the way that the story is being told is not as the same way as your typical kind of feature-length film stories. If you look at a lot of movies in the cinemas, if you look at a lot of movies on streaming sites, Netflix, Hulu, or any of these other kind of things, if you look at movies, kind of like feature films that stand alone, you'll see that the way it's structured is that in the beginning, a goal is proposed towards the character, and by the end, a goal is either achieved or failed. This movie's done a little bit differently, because instead of having one central goal for the character to focus on, it seems more like just a look into the life of the character that we're basically looking at. What does it mean? Well, basically, in the beginning of the movie, we do get a goal for the character. He's trying to escape on a raft from the island he's trapped on. But within the first 20-ish, 30 minutes of the movie, this is kind of gone. Basically, the main motivation of the movie is gone, and the character is now left with either no goal or a new goal. And while this might not work in a lot of feature-length films, because now the audience are just lost, not knowing what it is that they're supposed to look forward to, the way that this film basically builds up towards this kind of final goal and towards these different type of story beats allow us to understand that this isn't a movie about someone doing something. This is more of a movie about just someone and their life on the island, and what happens during as well as a little bit after the story. Basically, it's just a look into a portion or a few different portions and select kind of time frames of the life of our main character, of the life of the guy who washes up on the island in the beginning of the movie. And the reason that this kind of unique way of telling stories is important to this film is because it allows a story to be told that doesn't follow the main or the usual type of story beats. The Red Turtle in the end is a kind of strange film to watch. You go through a whole film without hearing much dialogue. You go through the whole film while guessing what's going to happen next, while guessing what might be on the character's mind, and while guessing even in the moment what might be happening, because you might not always know. But it keeps going, and it keeps going despite new goals being formed, new goals being lost, things just happening, but it never seems out of place. In one scene, in kind of around almost the end of the movie, in one scene there is a sequence where the island is struck with disaster. I won't mention what the disaster is and what the result of the disaster is, but even though this kind of natural disaster came out of almost nowhere, there is a little bit of hints towards it happening right before, as well as the fact that, they're on an island and it makes sense for it to happen. It doesn't seem out of place at all. It doesn't seem like the creators just ran out of things to do and threw in an event so that something can happen. Instead, it seems like a way not only to build character, but to just allow the characters to be in different situations and build upon the world of the Red Turtle. It might not be progressing the plot towards a final goal, because again, this is a movie that doesn't really have a final goal, but it does allow us a better look into who the character is, what this world is like, how would they react in this situation, And it allows us to experience the movie again and kind of get different feels and different kind of emotions from these different kind of scenes in the movie. Take a look at the movie, and when you're done, try to describe a plot in one line of events, and you'll understand that there's a lot of breaks and a lot of kind of pauses where they go from one kind of section in time to another where you're not exactly sure how much time passed. You get a general idea, but you don't get the exact amount of days. You don't know if it's a week, a month, or a year. You're just left guessing, and this is kind of, again, going back to the theme of the story, not telling you anything exactly and allowing you to infer things by yourself. And that's why this kind of storytelling works really well with at least this film in particular. But that's not the only kind of difference in the storytelling. You also get a few scenes which just kind of come out of nowhere and disappear into nowhere. And again, it doesn't seem out of place. In the beginning of the movie, we get a dream sequence, or a few dream sequence or hallucination sequences, whatever you want to call it, from the main character as he experiences different kind of delusions of him leaving the island or fighting different people on the island, or, you know, just a bunch of things that happen. And they just happen, and they're not referred to before, they're not foreshadowed, and they're not mentioned afterwards. These things are allowed to happen, and they're allowed to fade. The viewers are left thinking what happened. The characters are left thinking what happened. But it's not mentioned again, because the character doesn't need to mention it to anyone else except himself. And as the gears are turning in the character's mind, so does it turn in the mind of the viewer as they wonder what this dream might represent, what might be happening, and while the character is wondering what just happened. And it's this kind of relation between the characters and the viewers as they're thinking about different kind of odd scenes that happen that allow you to really get into the mind of the characters without them even saying a word. You see their dreams. You see basically what's going on in their mind while they're asleep and while their thoughts are not being guided by their conscious brain, instead just being allowed to flow by their subconscious brain. And it's in this different type of scenarios that allows us to not only understand the characters a little bit better, but allows us to kind of infer where the story is going. Sometimes these scenes might be foreshadowing. Sometimes there might just be scenes that allow us to understand the characters a little bit more. But always, they would arrive, they would stay, and then they would go, gone forever. And when you're looking back on these scenes later on in the movie, when you're reflecting on these scenes, you're really able to just see or connect the scenes to the rest of the movie and to the characters and try to understand what's happening. Again, the movie keeps you guessing. And this happens a lot throughout the movie. This is basically one of the main themes of the movie, is that the viewers aren't completely allowed to understand every single thing in the film, except they're allowed enough information to come up with an explanation on their own. And that really leads to one of the most interesting things about this film is the conversations that you can have about it afterwards with people you watched it with or with other people who's just watched it on their own. You're allowed to have a conversation, and when you talk, you're kind of able to see how different people see this film differently. Because again, this whole film is up to interpretation. A goal is not set, events are not explained, they happen, you take them in, and they're gone. And so, when you're talking to someone else, you might have a completely different view of how the movie happened, and what happened in the movie, and what the movie means. But while talking to someone else, not only does this allow you to understand what might be going on in your head, as well as what might be going on in the head of the person you're talking to in terms of the movie, but allows you to just understand better what the movie might mean. It really allows for some interesting conversation, arguments, or just 20 or 30 minutes of screaming at each other about what the movie could mean and what the movie actually means. But in the end, the movie is an experience that doesn't stop on the screen. It's an experience that goes beyond that. It goes into conversation, into thought process, into speculation and theories. And if I were to say, those are the kind of people who might enjoy the movie the most. People who want to think about the movies and not just passively enjoy them. People who want to basically be connected to the movie in some kind of way, to experience the movie in a slightly different way with someone who might just be sitting next to them and viewing the same movie, to have conversations about the movie, to have arguments, or someone who just wants to see a movie that is stunningly animated, that is beautifully done without any dialogue. In the end, I do feel like anyone can enjoy this movie, but to truly appreciate it, you have to be someone who's willing to delve a little bit below the surface, into the symbolisms, into the underlying story of it, and allow yourself to keep yourself guessing throughout the movie as you try and pinpoint what it is that the directors had in mind. And ladies and gentlemen, that is all we have for the program. Now let's get into the questions, or question, as it seems we only have one at the current moment, to the movie. And the question is the movie realistic, or is it more of a fantastical movie? Well, the thing is, the movie has elements of both. It starts off in the realms of realism, where people are only allowed enough abilities, or people, basically they're not superhuman. The main character is a regular person, and it shows. It's drilled into the minds of the viewers over and over again how ordinary he is. But this isn't to say that the movie isn't fantastical. It's just to say that our main character isn't going to be allowed any basic deus ex machinas or any kind of forgotten power or chosen one. Basically, what I mean is that the movie, beginning of the movie, it establishes our main character as normal. However, the movie itself has a sense of fantastical nature towards it. And whether this is in just the dream sequences or whether this bleeds into the actual movie itself with some turtle magic and some other things that happen later on, it still keeps itself in the realms of reality while not being afraid of kind of pushing the boundaries of what can be received as real and the boundaries of our suspension of basically logic and reality and all these kind of things. Give it a watch yourself and see if you think it's more fantastical or more of a realistic kind of movie. Because I think it comes down to the person, really, because two different people, again, might get completely different stories from what happened, and that's kind of the fun of it. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for staying till the end of our program, to the end of storytelling on our analysis on the film The Red Turtle. We hope you enjoyed, and we hope you take something away from this today. And we will be back next week with the next installment of Storytelling. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.
Afrik Best Radio is online radio, is either pre-recorded MP3 files or live via a microphone broadcast that are streamed over the internet. With Afrik Best Radio, we are not limited to one geographic area or dependent upon syndication partners picking up your show in order for it to be heard. It can be heard all over the world, global. The best and easiest way to listen to Afrik Best Radio on your phone in your car is via the appropriate app, Afrik Best Radio, official apps. Our website at www.afrikbestradio.online. Our partners that offer apps include Afrik Best Radio on Pandora, Afrik Best Radio on last.fm, Afrik Best Radio on iHeartRadio, Afrik Best Radio on LiveX Live, Afrik Best Radio on TuneIn Radio, and many more. Just type Afrik Best